John Robert.
Sarah, in reference to the president's tweets this morning that have been a matter of some discussion today, you said earlier on Fox News that the president has a right to defend himself when he is attacked, and it's no secret that this particular program has been very critical of him. However, the nature of the tweets this morning has drawn condemnation from people on Capitol Hill, including the Speaker of the House, Senator Graham, Senator Susan Collins, all of whom are allies of the president. Did the president go too far with this tweet in its deeply personal nature?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that the president has been attacked mercilessly on personal accounts by members on that program. And I think he's been very clear that when he gets attacked, he's going to hit back. I think the American people elected somebody who's tough, who's smart, and who's a fighter. And that's Donald Trump. And I don't think that it's a surprise to anybody that he fights fire with fire. The things that this show has called him, and not just him, but numerous members of his staff, including myself and many others, are very deeply personal. So to then turn and pretend like, this approach is, I guess it's kind of like we're living in the twilight zone. They do this day after day after day, and then the president responds and defends himself, and everybody is appalled and blown away. Frankly, if this had happened in the previous administration, the type of attacks launched on this program, the things they say, utterly stupid, personality disorder, mentally ill, constant personal attacks, calling multiple members liars to their faces while they're sitting on their programs, the rest of the media would have said, guys, no way, hold on. But nobody does that. But the president, he's not going to step back. He's showed that, and that's exactly what he did today.
If I could just follow on that, Sarah, if I could just follow on that. A couple of the criticisms from supporters of the president have been that this particular tweet was beneath the dignity of the office. Where does the president draw that line on the dignity of the office?
Look, I think that he shows that every day in the decisions that he's making, the focus and the priorities he's laid out in his agenda. But he's not going to sit back and be attacked by the liberal media, Hollywood elites, and when they hit him, he's going to hit back.
Sarah? I have a healthcare question, but on this, just one other aspect of it. Some have suggested in their tweet response or public announcements today that the president misconstrued one of the messages that should have been gathered from the shooting that involved Steve Scalise and others, that the hostility of the verbal environment can create an atmosphere of violence. I'm not saying that, but members of Congress have said that about this particular tweet. I know that episode affected the president and those here at the White House personally, very importantly and deeply. Do you have any reaction to that sentiment that conversations like this create an atmosphere that is either dangerous or one we need to avoid?
The president in no way, form or fashion has ever promoted or encouraged violence. If anything, quite the contrary. And he was simply pushing back and defending himself.
Sarah, what about the Republicans who are criticizing the president?
I want to go back to the shooting and remember what President Trump said then. He said, our country will perhaps become closer, more unified, so important. Does his tweet this morning, his series of tweets, help to unify the country?
Again, Kristen, I think I've asked, and this question has been asked, and I've answered it several times.
Do his tweets help to unify the country, to do what he said he wanted to see happen in the wake of that shooting?
Look, again, I think that the president is pushing back against people who attack him day after day after day. Where is the outrage on that? You guys are constantly coming and asking, like, is this okay? He does it one time. This is day after day after day. And it's not just the president. The only person that I see a war on is this president and everybody that works for him.
Two questions to follow up on that. One is that I understand your point, but he is the president of the United States. They are cable news anchors, so he has to stand to a higher standard, one. And two, you talk about criticism. He said that former President Obama wasn't born in this country, right? So he clearly was a part of criticizing the past president, who was not immune to criticism himself. So I wonder how you make that argument.
Again, I think I've been pretty clear that when the president gets hit, he's going to hit back harder, which is what he did here today.
Doesn't he have to meet a higher standard than cable news anchors? Sarah, doesn't he have to meet a higher standard than cable news anchors?
Look, I don't think you can expect someone to be personally attacked day after day, minute by minute, and sit back. Look, the American people elected a fighter. They didn't elect somebody to sit back and do nothing. They knew what they were getting when they voted for Donald Trump, and he won overwhelmingly.
Sarah, how is insulting a woman
You've
on
seen-
Twitter being a
what-
fighter?
What about the impact of statements like this on his effectiveness? There was a Marist poll this week that said 68% of registered voters say the president's tweets are reckless and distracting. Only 22% say that they're effective and informative. And Republicans on this question are split down the middle. Half of Republicans say that they're reckless and distracting. So how can you argue that this is something the president must do?
I answered this question yesterday in regards to the poll. I think anytime the president has a chance to speak directly to the American people, it's a good thing.
Sarah, as a woman, how do you feel about the president attacking another woman specifically for her looks, and what does that show as an example to how men should be treating other women?
Look, everybody wants to make this an attack on a woman and equality. What about the constant attacks that he receives or the rest of us? I'm a woman and I've been attacked by this show multiple times, but I don't cry foul because of it. I think that you want to create this false narrative. One hand, it's like, let's treat everybody equally, and on the other hand, they attack, and he responds, and apparently that's wrong. I'm sorry, guys. I've answered this question. Allie.
Too, and this kind of gets to the point that's been made, and
Exactly. This is the point
I
that's
wanna-
been made, so I'm not sure why we're continuing
You've
to
been
answer
talking
the
about
same
the
question.
president as a fighter. I just want to put it in because you talk about being personally affected by all of this as well, and that nothing is wrong with the president fighting fire with fire is the argument that you're making. So I would ask this to you, sort of on a personal level. You have stood here and talked about your family from this podium. Are you going to tell your kids this behavior is okay?
Look, I've been asked before when it comes to role models as a person of faith. I think we all have one perfect role model. And when I'm asked that question, I point to God, I point to my faith, and that's where I would tell my kids to look. None of us are perfect, and certainly there's only one that is, and that's where I would point that direction.
I want to ask you my follow-up question just on more policy points with the G20 coming up next week.
That would be a change in tone policy.
I disagree with that. I think we talk about policy a lot here, but I want to ask about his meeting with President Putin that is coming up next week that has just been confirmed by Gary Cohn and H.R. McMaster. And a definitive answer from you on whether the president will bring up election interference. It is clearly the biggest topic between the U.S. and Russia right now, the fact that Moscow meddled in the election. Is the president going to press Putin on that?
Obviously, I'm not going to get ahead of the president's conversation, as we typically do. I would imagine we'll have a readout after that conversation takes place. John,
Thanks.
I'll come to you next.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sarah. The president's tweet today, does it help his legislative agenda? Does it help him win the votes of those 9 senators who have come out against that Senate bill? Senator Collins, Senator Murkowski, for instance. What's your view on that?
Again, I think we're just looking for new ways to rephrase this question. The president was attacked. He responded. There's nothing more I have to add than that. John, busy.
To his legislative agenda, I'm not asking about the tweet
Look, I
itself.
think the president
I'm
would-
asking about whether or not this helps his legislative agenda.
I think the president would love for us all to focus on the legislative agenda a whole lot more. You look at the coverage over the last month of the extended period between May and June, all of the major networks, if you look at their coverage and what they're talking about, they spent 1 minute in the evening newscast talking about tax reform, 3 minutes on infrastructure, 5 minutes on the economy and jobs, 17 minutes on healthcare, and 353 minutes attacking the president and pushing a false narrative on Russia. I mean, look at that in comparison. If you guys want to talk about legislative agenda and focus on policy and priorities, you guys get to help set that table. And 353 minutes of attacks against the president and driving a false narrative, and 1 minute on tax reform. That's over the course of a month. That's incredible. The numbers, guys, the numbers don't lie. The media's focus on priorities, they don't line up with the rest of America. Right now, we've got our economy's growing, the stock market's up, unemployment is down, jobs are back, and ISIS is on the run. America is winning, and that's what we'd like to talk about. But you guys constantly ignore that narrative.
Points that you
Go ahead,
make, Sarah,
John.
all of those points that you make, Sarah, about the
I'm sorry,
positive
John?
elements of what the president's agenda are certainly true. All of those things are true. But the president today put out this tweet which takes away from all of that. And do you expect us here in this room to simply ignore that? I think that's the valid question that should be asked of you right now. Should we just ignore this entirely?
I think he's put out a number of tweets on healthcare, on the immigration bills that'll be in the House today, but that's not being talked about. That's not being asked about. But the discrepancy, again, 353 minutes. You can't say that you want to talk about policy and then you look at the numbers and they just don't lie. You can't expect for that amount of attack and intensity to come on a president and him to never respond. As you guys know, the president is getting ready to depart for the Department of Energy, and we'll be speaking on that soon. Thanks so much.
So no apology from the president, sir?